A family arrives at a checkpoint in 1955. The guard booth looks like any Soviet border crossing, but they're nowhere near a border. Behind that gate sits a city of 50,000 people. Schools, hospitals, apartment blocks, factories, and it does not exist on any Soviet map. This wasn't an anomaly. Between 1946 and the collapse of the USSR, the Soviet government built at least 42 closed cities, entire urban centers deleted from public cartography. Their official designation, Zakrytowe Administrativnowe Territorialnowe Obrazovanie, ZATO. Closed administrative territorial formation. Inside those fences, nuclear weapons laboratories, plutonium production reactors, chemical warfare research, submarine construction, space program support facilities. Millions of Soviet citizens were issued special internal passports. They received P.O. box addresses instead of real street names. They were told they could never leave without permission. This is the story of the Invisible Empire. The closed city system began immediately after World War II. Stalin needed nuclear weapons. That required uranium enrichment, plutonium production, weapons assembly, and absolute secrecy. America had built the atomic bomb using isolated facilities, Los Alamos, Hanford, Oak Ridge. The Soviets went further. They didn't just hide the labs, they hid entire cities. The first closed city, Chelyabinsk 40, later renamed Ozersk, built starting in 1945 to house the Mayak plutonium production complex. At its peak, 87,000 residents, according to post-Soviet municipal records. None of them appeared in the census. The city didn't appear on maps. Mail arrived addressed to P.O. box numbers in nearby towns. Mailbox cities, locals called them. To live there, you needed a propiska, an internal passport entry granting residents permission. Only state-approved scientists, engineers, military personnel, and their families qualified. And once you moved inside the fence, leaving required written approval. By the 1980s, the system included at least 42 cities. Most were nuclear-related. Uranium enrichment, reactor operations, weapons design, naval facilities. Here's what we can verify from declassified Soviet records and post-collapse documentation. Nuclear Weapons Complex, Sarov, Arzamas 16, Federal Nuclear Center, Weapons Design. Snezhinsk, Chelyabinsk 70, All-Russian Research Institute of Technical Physics. Zelenogorsk, Krasnoyarsk 45, Uranium Enrichment. Seversk, Tomsk 7, Plutonium Production. Military Installations, Vilyuchinsk, Pacific Fleet Nuclear Submarine Base. Znamensk, Baikonur Cosmodrome Support City. Kapustin Yar, Missile Testing Range. The USSR poured resources into these cities. Residents received higher salaries, better housing than ordinary Soviet towns, reliable food supply, Western goods unavailable elsewhere. But you couldn't tell your relatives outside where you worked. You couldn't invite guests without clearance. Your children's birth certificates listed the mailbox address, not the real city. And if you tried to leave permanently, you lost everything: apartment, job, privileges. You faced potential criminal charges for violating residency laws. A closed city looked like any Soviet industrial town. Apartment blocks in rows. Central square with Lenin statue. Schools, clinics, shops, except for the checkpoints, and the perimeter fence, and the guards who checked every vehicle leaving. Residents needed passes to exit even temporarily. A day trip to visit family in a nearby open city? Paperwork submitted days in advance. Children grew up knowing not to talk about their parents' work. Students were told their city didn't exist. According to post-Soviet memoirs, some ZATO kids didn't see an accurate map of the Soviet Union until after 1991. The work itself remained classified. A chemist at Mayak couldn't tell his wife what isotopes he handled. An engineer at Sarov couldn't explain to his children what he designed. And when accidents happened, radiation exposure, chemical contamination, workplace injuries at sensitive facilities, medical records were often classified or destroyed. The state provided. The state protected. The state knew everything, and in return, you vanished from the official map of your own country. But here's the catch. Closed city residents often lived better than most Soviet citizens. Higher wages, better apartments, shops stocked with goods unavailable in ordinary towns, imported coffee, quality fabrics, reliable electronics. Some facilities had closed distribution centers. Scientists and engineers could purchase items never seen in regular Soviet stores. Parents chose the closed cities deliberately. A job offer at a ZATO facility meant stability. Your children would attend well-funded schools. You escaped the chronic shortages that defined Soviet daily life. But the fence was real. The surveillance was real. The KGB presence was real. You were privileged, provided for, trapped. And the state reminded you daily, this city doesn't exist, which means you don't exist unless we say you do. The lengths the USSR went to keep these cities hidden bordered on absurd. Foreign maps showed the locations as empty forest or agricultural land. Soviet civilian maps left them blank or showed false terrain. State cartographers received classified instructions on which cities to omit. Geography textbooks avoided mentioning certain regions entirely. By the 1960s, Western intelligence knew many of the sites existed. U-2 flights had photographed them. Satellite reconnaissance mapped the facilities. But in official Soviet reality, they weren't there. And here's the absurd part. Even Soviet citizens from other cities couldn't visit. A truck driver delivering supplies needed special clearance just to pass through the gates. A relative coming from Moscow? Written invitation. Background check. Security approval. And then, the system began to crack. When the USSR collapsed in 1991, the question became, what do you do with 42 cities that officially don't exist? What happens when the government maintaining that fiction vanishes overnight? After 1991, most of the closed cities opened, partially. The checkpoints came down. The cartographic censorship ended. Residents could finally tell their relatives where they lived. But the economic transition hit hard. Many facilities lost funding. Scientists emigrated. The privileges that made confinement bearable evaporated. And here's the reveal. The system never fully ended. Modern Russia still maintains dozens of closed administrative territories. Some are the old Soviet nuclear cities. Others are military bases, naval facilities, strategic installations. You can visit some former ZATOs as a tourist now. As of recent reporting, Sarov, the nuclear weapons lab, remains fully closed. Seversk allows limited access. Ozersk, the first closed city, opened to Russian citizens but remains restricted for foreigners. The environmental legacy is harder to measure. Decades of classified nuclear and chemical work left contamination that's still being documented. Mayak's documented waste dumping severely contaminated the Teka River system. Medical records were destroyed or remain classified. Historians estimate 1.5 to 2 million people lived in Soviet closed cities at the system's peak. Some spent their entire lives inside the fence. Born, raised, worked, died in cities that didn't appear on maps until they were middle-aged. Historians consider it the largest sustained experiment in urban secrecy in modern history. An invisible empire built on atomic weapons, industrial chemistry, and a bargain millions accepted. Comfort and stability in exchange for existence itself. If you want the next hidden chapter of the Cold War, subscribe. Next time, we're going inside the fence at Ozersk, City 40, the first and most notorious Soviet closed city, where plutonium production for the USSR's first atomic bombs created a disaster that dwarfed Chernobyl. And it remained secret for decades. And tell me in the comments, would you have taken the job inside the fence?